Welcome to PT Podcast with Eric, edition number 15. So this is the edition that we're going to look at running strides and running patterns. It's something that over time we just seem to have gravitated towards with our clients, and a lot of the rehabilitation is built around clients straining their calves, whether it's a level 1, level 2, or a grade 3 tear. And we start to understand why these injuries have come about, and then the client starts to realize, wow, that injury is a blessing in disguise because there was a biomechanics issue and their running patterns were just way off, and that includes their running technique. So what do we look for when we're assessing a client for the first time? So firstly, I would look at where is the site of injury. Okay, they may have an ultrasound with the soft tissue tear, measuring where it is and the size of it and the location and the depth as well. Most of the calf strains will be the medial, so the inner side of the calf, right where the belly is, or it could be right where the junction is in the middle, where the two of the gastrocnemius sort of come together. Quite a common spot. And then we start to ask questions, okay, are there, or is their soleus really tight, or is their Achilles thickened? So we sort of look at the whole lower leg as a whole. Some clients do have what we call a Baker cyst, or a buildup of calcium deposits in the back of the knee. So it's a lump and it can be quite painful. So that means that their calf or their gluteals aren't activating properly, and that Baker cyst can act as like the loading deposit for their gluteals. And it's amazing when you're working with the clients that you see compensation at its best. It's amazing how the body will adapt and compensate in order to perform a task. And in this point in time, it's the ability to run. The most common thing, and this is the great thing I love about the human body, is that when you look at children run, they run on the ball of their feet. Now, I have mentioned this before in earlier PT podcasts, but you will never see a child in their earlier stages in life, they'll never run heel to toe, okay? It's just a natural phenomenon for a child to run on the ball of their feet. So why is it that we, as we get older, move to heel to toe running strides, okay? I think when we start going heel to toe, it's because we want our hips to take the load as opposed to our legs, okay, as opposed to our shins, our calves, and to some extent our quadriceps and knees. By letting the load go to our hips, we feel like we're cushioning, but in actual fact, we're increasing too much load to an area. We have this lumbopelvic region, and then we have lower back pain because they're running stride. And then what you'll find, if you were looking at them from behind, you'll see the pelvis pretty much tilt from side to side, and then that's when they get lower back pain. So when I look at a client jogging or running for the first time, whether it's on a flat surface on grass or tiles and so on, or whether they're jogging on a treadmill, it's really important to look at what's happening with the ankles, okay? So is the foot pronating in, okay, or is it supinating and rolling out? It's quite interesting. If the client just runs naturally, most of the time the ankle will pronate in. It's quite an interesting thing because me, on the other hand, my foot will roll outward. Okay, so I've got to be very conscious as running on the ball of my feet to keep it a nice neutral sort of ankle. But when you do have that medial rotation, you get that pressure on the inside of the knee. So it's quite a common symptom to a client where they say, oh, my knees are quite sore when I run, and it's usually on the inner side of the knee. Okay, and it's putting pressure on that medial collateral ligament. So once you have a look at what's happening with their ankles, okay, then we have a look at what's happening to their knees, and then we have a look at what's happening to their hips. Okay, now once we've looked at that and the biomechanical chain there, you can start to look at spiral patterns. So is one shoulder dropping down more than the other? Does the shoulder drop and rotate inward? Does their hand sort of come before them and then behind them? It's amazing all the different running techniques that exist out there. Now, the most important thing as fitness and health professionals is that we don't want to correct the running technique too much. Okay, we want that client to run in their natural state. If you ever look at any marathon, okay, any competitive marathon, everyone's got their own unique running stride, and you have to affirm that and support it. Okay, so you don't want to say this is the perfect stride and you must copy me. You must adapt to their style of running. Okay, however, there are some fundamentals in the new way to run these days. What I find when clients start jogging, the first thing I say is try running on the ball of their feet, because most of the time they'll run heel to toe. So running on the ball of their feet is quite unusual, because then they run on their toes, and it's like, okay, once they run a few laps up and down, okay, start to relax your ankles. And then once they start to relax their ankles from that toe running stride, they start to understand a little bit more about what their feet should be doing. Now, this is the most important thing I want you to take away from today's PT podcast. It's all about the knees and where do you focus. Okay, the best thing to advise a client is to let them run with their knees. Lead with their knees. Do not run with your feet. Okay, do not run with your chest, even though your chest has to be nice and tall. Run with your knees. And when you lead with your knees, your feet naturally will kick up higher, and your heels will kick up higher to your glutes. And then what happens, as you lead with your knees, your hip flexors are working more. Once you start getting that nice knee high motion, you start to get triple flexion between your ankles, your knees, and your hips. And then you start to get a really nice running stride or a gait pattern. Now, this could happen all in one sitting. It's the thing I love about this technique, and you take clients through this, is that it reminds me of Forrest Gump and the movie in Forrest Gump when he's running and he's getting chased and he's wearing the braces, and then the braces start falling off him, and then he starts running faster and faster, and his girlfriend says, "Run, Forrest, run." Okay, this is pretty much what I witness every time I advise clients to learn how to run for the first time again. It's amazing. It's almost like the shackles and the braces have been taken away from their legs, and then they know how to run again. It is phenomenal. So I love what I do, because I see in the space of, probably 5 minutes, a client learning how to run, which they've always wanted to do for the last 10 or 15 years. And that's the great joy that we have as fitness professionals, is that we can advise our clients to learn new techniques, such as running and gait patterns. So look at the ankles. Are we pronating? Are we supinating? Okay. Then we look at the shins. Okay, are we leading with our knees? What's happening with our pelvis if we stand anteriorly or posteriorly to them and watch their pelvic tilting? And then once we've covered all that, and we want them to lead with their knees and their heels are kicking up quite high and they're running on the ball of their feet with relaxed ankles, you're going to ask them to keep their chest up nice and tall. Now, in the past, we used to lean forward. Okay, we used to try and keep momentum with our running stride, and by leaning forward, we're going to run further and faster. Now, that is quite an inefficient running technique these days. It's all about light on your feet and letting your glutes switch on, plus your hip flexors. Now, the only way you're going to get your hip flexors to switch on effectively is that you need to ask the client to pull their belly button or their navel into their spine. By doing that, you're switching on your transverse abdominis. And I always mention the TA. The TA, I believe, is the most fundamental muscle that is so important in holding lumbopelvic stability. Okay? When you've got that navel pulling in and their TA switching on, then their hip flexors are working really well. They're nice and tall, relaxed ankles, chest up tall, and they're relieving any pressure off their spine and their lower back. When you let your guts relax or their stomach relax, it's going to go straight to your lower back. Okay, something's got to hold you up. So I'd rather it be the anterior chain or the front of your body rather than my posterior chain. Okay, because let my glutes do what they need to do. Okay, and that's to drive and produce power. And the last thing I would recommend is that you ask the client to keep their chin tucked down. Usually when you ask them to put their chest up nice and tall, their chin goes up into the air. Okay, and we don't want that either, because then they're putting pressure on the back of their neck. So you want them to tuck their chin. Now, once you've created that running technique, they will be nice and tall, knees high, soft ankles, and then they will naturally put their hands higher, and then their heels will kick up higher to their glutes. That is how we recommend running techniques basically at PT National. And it's so exciting to watch a client who's had a major calf tear or a strain, even with an injury, they can correct it in one sitting. And then we just do our normal rehabilitation techniques and stuff. So I would highly recommend that. Try it yourself first. Running on a treadmill, similar but slightly different. You may have to increase the pace on the treadmill so you can get the same gait stride or the same length of stride. That's what we tend to find. And on a treadmill, you always put, if it's a commercial treadmill, you always put incline 1 so that client's not getting any shin splints. And if it's a semi-commercial treadmill or it's for the home, I would recommend an incline 2 or a gradient of 2. Okay. Now, in terms of the speed, well, that depends on where you're at and what your running technique is. The other thing that you can do in terms of a coaching cue is that you recommend a 1 and 2 count. So, for example, as they're running, it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, and that will just keep a nice constant cadence for that client and allows them to focus on more things just than their breathing and so on. So PT podcast number 15 is going to be a short one, but probably one of the most important ones. So you may have to listen to this a couple of times so you get it right. But if you need any further support, send us a post and I'm more than happy to respond to your questions.